Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
We're in episode 4 of the G5 Classified podcast. Gabe Kuhn with Kyron Samuels. We try to bring you all the G5 action of the week and just college football in general. And I got to say, Kai, off the top, I think you understand this. I'm flying high this week, brother. I'm feeling good about myself. And that jersey behind me, that means something. That means something to me this week.
Yes, sir. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum here because Jacksonville State is 0-3 for the first time since 2005. So I'm adjusted right now. I haven't experienced this in my time as a Gamecock before, a Gamecock fan, and I was a player. I have never been through this. So this is a learning period for me. But I'm going to just put all that energy into supporting the Memphis Tigers. So
hey, brother, listen.
Handle it more positive.
Jacksonville State's no stranger to a win in Doak. Can we say that? That's something we have in common there. Come on.
We got that in common, man. So we're going to share the common experiences, and we got a lot to talk about this week, so I'm excited.
Yeah, so Memphis beats Florida State 20-12. That's the only place we can open this up. And to me, what strikes me, and we'll get to the ins and outs of what happened, but what strikes me the most is nothing about it was fluky, right? If you're talking about flukes, most of those came from Florida State. That nasty interception there in the flat that Seth Hennigan threw where the Florida State defender just sort of stole it away from his receiver, the big deep shot to Malik Benson down the middle of the field. Everything else, Memphis controlled the line of scrimmage, played unbelievable defense, and just handled that game how they needed to handle it. And the other part of it is this Memphis team, they can win in different ways. This is not just like your grandfather's Memphis team. This team can go ahead and beat you with defense, can beat you with physicality. They don't have to score 55 points a game to go do it.
No, and the funniest thing, like you said, I believe 100%, it wasn't a fluke, right? But I think they left some meat on the bone. I think they could have beat them by even more. I thought they left a lot of points on the field. I thought the defense played very well, but I thought offensively, even though they moved the ball, Seth made some really good throws. I thought they left some meat on the bone. So I think that's a positive to take away. Not only the win, because the win is the most important thing, but the fact that you probably didn't even play your best football and still were able to win by 8 points on the road against a team like Florida State. So going forward, I think that's going to give them a ton of confidence, and it gives the coach something to build on, right? Like normally you get a win like this, everybody's going to be reading the press clippings. You're going to be feeling great about yourself, and you should feel good. But there's enough correctables where the coach can still be like, hey, we got a lot of areas to improve. And if we want to get where we want to go, we have to improve in those areas to make the playoffs. And that's the goal right now, because after this, there's no stopping the playoff train. The playoff discussion is coming in full force, and it should be, because you've proven that you're in that tier of G5 programs that you should be able to have that as an attainable goal.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I look at that offense, and I definitely thought they left a bunch of meat on the bone. But defensively, they did not leave any, man. They saw exactly what they could do to DJU. Bring those – and we talked about it. Hell, bring 5, 6, 7-man pressures, see how he reacts. He didn't react positively, I can tell you that. And Jordan Hankins, that defensive coordinator, man, he made himself some money. Now, I don't know if he'll get re-upped at $1 million per year at Memphis. I don't know if that's in the budget. I think there'd be some budgetary concerns there. But when we talk about – a guy who just sort of put himself on the scene, Jordan Hankins did a hell of a job. Even on the Hail Mary, bringing 6. His defense, man, 12 freaking tackles for loss, 4 sacks, owned an offensive line who I talked with Mike Norvell on my show this offseason. He's talking about his O-line and his D-line, and I think his D-line's okay, but his O-line, he's like, we got 4 or 5 returning starters. We really feel good about that group coming off that 13-0 season. Man, there was somebody in the backfield every single play for Memphis. And I don't really know what to sort of latch on to fully when it comes to why Jordan Hankins is so much better than the guys that came before him. And Mike McIntyre, who had a lot of success, previous stops at Colorado, that type of thing. And then you had Matt Barnes from Ohio State, who was the DC at Ohio State. Like, I can't really put my finger on what I would say is they're just more well coached, and he understands situations a whole lot better than they did. And that's why. And here's the other outside thought that I was thinking about. Like, Mike McIntyre's used to a fair amount of talent. Matt Barnes used to a fair amount of talent with the schools and the programs he's been a part of. Jordan Hankins comes from UT Martin and Marshall. He's used to getting a whole lot more out of maybe a little bit less. And that's part of it. I think all that comes together into a coordinator who's going to be a hot topic the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think there's another point to be made about coaching to the moment, right? We've talked about it before with other programs, G5 level. I don't want to, single them out, but it keeps sticking in my mind. The Boise State offensive staff, right? Like, there was times in the Oregon game where they didn't go for it. They didn't go for the jugular. They didn't try to take their heads off. And I think Hankins was just like, listen, man, we have nothing to lose here. And let's coach like it. Let's put our horses on the field. Let's make them prove that they can make those plays that they haven't shown they could make yet to beat us. And Florida State wasn't able to do that. Even when DJ did make a good throw, there was some crazy drops from Florida State, inopportune missed assignments up front. Make them prove that they can beat you in a way that they haven't proven yet. And he did that. So I got to give him all the credit in the world for that.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like part of me, like that day, watching that game, I'm like, this guy's a psychopath. But then going back and watching it, you're like, man, that wasn't psychopathic at all. That's what you're supposed
Organized
to do.
Chaos.
What you needed to do. There were some times where he's bringing 8-man simulated pressures, where he's only bringing 4, dropping DNs, doing all this shit, and all of it equaled DJU being uncomfortable the entire day against the defense. It's not all that big. That's not as talented as what you have on the Florida State side of the football, but they just were ready to go and executed at the highest of levels. Now, I want to get to the offense real quick. Seth Hennigan, I got to give him a whole lot of credit. He was placing the ball really well. Now, I don't know, and I do want your opinion on this. I'm not saying he's like a next-level quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but he can put himself in that late day 3 undrafted free agent conversation if he continues to play like this, because he doesn't have like crazy athleticism. He doesn't have that crazy deep ball by any stretch of the imagination, but he can place some balls, and he does it under pressure too. He does it in pressure situations. There was a 3rd down, and I wish I had the clip of it pulled up, but it was a ball to his tight end Anthony Landfear, where the linebacker's giving inside leverage, and he's got Seth had to buy some time. He threw a damn bullet to him, and it was a 25-yard gain because of that on 3rd and 7, I believe. Like, he's just placing the ball really well, taking his checkdowns when he needs to, and just sort of dinking and dunking down the field. Now, I want that offense to open it up a little bit more as the season goes along, but you got to take what the defense gives you, and I thought he did that really well all day.
100%. And just in terms of his maybe next-level evaluation, like, look at the backup quarterback situation across the NFL. A guy with his size profile alone checks a lot of boxes that a lot of quarterbacks don't, that may have better physical traits or may play at a bigger school. He has a nice frame. He has super production over the course of his career. He's a guy that I think can get into a situation like an East-West Shrine Bowl or maybe a Senior Bowl and get with some more elite level talent that he hasn't necessarily played with over the course of his career in Memphis and shine in a position like that. I think of a guy last year like Spencer Pratt. I think they kind of remind me of each other a little bit in terms of where they can go if you maximize their ability and skill set, and if they could take advantage of the pre-draft process. So I see a guy like that, and I think that he has a chance to be 5th round type guy. I don't want to, oversell or anything here, but
sure,
why not, man? He's playing at a level over the course of multiple years. This is not a one-off. He's had some really good production the last couple of years here, and if they go on a run here and win the AAC, get into a playoff game, spotlight's going to be on him. It's going to be because he played some damn good football for another season. So I think everything is in front of him. If that's a realistic goal, if that's a goal that he wants, I think it's realistic for him.
Yeah, and I think he definitely wants it. I like just hearing him talk, in the preseason. He said this next 3 months defines my sort of football career, my football journey, and I completely agree with him. Like, because he already owns the passing yards record at the University of Memphis. He's close to the passing touchdowns record. It's just like all of those stats look different unless you sort of get to that upper echelon as far as like team success. And he's had a 10-win season, but the 2 first year, freshman, sophomore year, 6-6. If he can get over top, get to 10, 11 wins, put himself and put this team in a conversation for the college football playoff, that legacy is going to be probably the best in the history of the University of Memphis. Now, on the other side, Florida State, we've been talking about them the first 2 weeks. They're cooked. I don't know what we can say now to add to the conversation we've had the first 2 weeks, Kai. Like, that's where I'm at. This team doesn't have redeeming quality. And I heard Mike in his press conference, earlier this week, basically say, I appreciate how DJ Uiagalelei has been, getting ready for games, the way he's been preparing. And he basically went on to say he's given us a chance. That was the quote he gave out. And I'm like, man, it ain't getting better for Florida State. It's just not. They may win a game or two, but I just don't see it getting – I don't see a bowl game in their future the way they're playing right now.
The schedule only gets tougher from here, right? And the big thing is that I think he's correct in his assessment that DJ's given them a chance to win. But that's probably the biggest problem. If that is the level that he's playing at, the rest of the team isn't very good. Let's just be honest about it. We saw what DJ could do with decent talent around him at Clemson. They were still a 10-win team. Oregon State, they went and had a 9-3 regular season, I believe. They were, or 8-4 regular season. They were in the hunt in the thick of the Pac-12. We've seen what DJ can do with decent talent around them, with the functional offensive line, and they just aren't getting that from the rest of their team. Even on the defense, they only gave up 20 points, I believe. But like I said, I think the offense of Memphis left a ton of points on the board, and I don't see it get any better from here on out. So it's a tough position to be in as a coach, and I think it's an even tougher position to be in as the players, because after a certain while, like you had all these expectations, you work your ass off in the preseason, you get into a game like Georgia Tech, and you're like, all right, that's a tough loss. We'll put that one behind us. Then you get embarrassed on your home field against Boston College, and then you get embarrassed again. It's like at a certain point, you hit that wall and you realize this team just doesn't have it. So you have to make a choice to either go into the tank, which is a very realistic scenario I can see happening, or you can fight back and try to salvage the season and get to a bowl game. But it's uphill climbing for that team, and I kind of feel bad for them at this point.
Now, I want to go around the rest of college football real quick before we get to our winner and our loser of the week. LSU, South Carolina, that game was wild. LSU gets over top on the road at South Carolina 36-33. That game was defined by 13 penalties by South Carolina. And then at the end of the game, brother, this is where sometimes I try to be easy on coaches with their decision-making late in games. Sometimes I try to, soften the blow. I can't do that with Shane Beamer this week, man. No. What he did at the end of the game, 1st and 10, to run the ball for 1 yard, run the clock down for a 45-yard field goal, try to play Beamer ball like his daddy, and do it with a college kicker. It's like you have to be more aggressive. Like the football gods, like I truly believe this. The football gods want you to be as aggressive as possible to go win a game. Don't play not to lose. Don't play for the tie and not to lose. Play a little bit more aggressive. Get that ball a little bit closer so you don't put your kicker in that situation with the game on the line. That pissed me off. By the end of that game, as well as I thought South Carolina played in the first 2.5 quarters, I basically said they deserved to lose. They deserve to lose after the way Shane Beamer played that game late.
Yeah, I tweeted that out right when he ran that first play and we're getting ready to go to the kick. But we were in the group chat and everybody's like, this dude's about to miss the kick. College kickers mostly don't make those type of field goals. And we'll talk about this later because I can go ahead and spoil my loser. My loser is Shane Beamer this week. So I'll say my full take for then. But just the overall thing, right? Let's look at it from this perspective. You just come off a major dominating win at Kentucky. That's not a major win to the majority of college football, but for that South Carolina program, that was a big win. And then you see how Kentucky played against Georgia, right? So you have shown that you can play really good football against a solid team. You're 2-0. You're headed in the right direction. You're about to put Brian Kelly on the ropes to go down 1-2 in his LSU season, and then you do that. It's just unfathomable to me because, especially when you think about the fact that they might be coaching for their jobs up there in South Carolina. This could be a season, if they don't show some tangible results, we could be talking about him being on the hot seat. He's already in those conversations, but I thought he quieted a little bit of that the first 2 weeks of the season, handling business. You put yourself right back in that situation, and it wasn't something where you were just completely outmatched. I think you were the better team for most of that football game. I think everybody would agree South Carolina was the better team. Even though the quarterback went down, you had Robbie Ashford come in there and play some solid football, and I don't know why you wouldn't trust him. Even though he took that sack on that last drive, he came back and ripped a nice throw over the middle of the field to get you back in the field.
The fact that they got down there showed enough from Robbie Ashford.
100%, especially when in that scenario where, hey, we don't need to score a touchdown per se. Let's just get a little bit closer. Let's get 10 more yards. Let's get 5.
Let's rip an out route. Let's do – I mean, it's not that complicated. You had 20-some-odd seconds, too. You can throw it over the middle of the field if it's a sure thing and go spike 100%.
It. Anything but hand the ball off, play for a field goal in that scenario. So I'll save my full take for later, but unfathomable decision from him, and I can't believe that he let the game, maybe his coaching career at South Carolina, come down to a kicker in that situation.
And I want to talk about officiating here in a second, but I want to get to this next game before we get to our winners and losers, because there was another call in this game that really blew my mind. But Georgia and Kentucky, I hate to say it, coming off that win for South Carolina 31-6 over Kentucky, and Georgia sort of riding high after the Clemson win and, looking sort of unbeatable through the first 2 weeks. I sort of saw this one. I saw this one go in this direction. You go into Kroger Field. Georgia has had struggles in the past in games like that, getting up for them, and they just didn't look like they had it. They just didn't have it. Offensively, they were not pacing the game the right way. Carson Beck looked out of it for the most part. Didn't really have his best stuff. But I will give Kentucky credit. They dialed in defensively. They tried to get some pressure in his face, make him uncomfortable, and they kept everything possible in front of them. But here's my other thing that I think could hamper Georgia by the time it gets to real winning time at the end of the season. Mike Bobo's got to be a little bit better than he was the other night. Just way too much predictability. Every time you see trips to one side of the field and Dominic Lovett is in the slot, what's coming? A bubble screen. Every single last time. He's got to be less predictable. He's got to take more shots down the field. Maybe he doesn't trust his skill position players like he has in the past, but I think they have enough talent to open it up more than they did the other night.
Yeah, and I've been a Bobo apologist because I think he's done a fantastic job since he took over from Monken, especially last season. They had a fantastic offense. And I think this year they're still going to have one of the better offenses in college football. But I would like to see him get the tight ends more involved. You have Oscar Delp, Benjamin Urosic, those guys. You have to find a way. They're game breakers, right? They're tendency breakers. They're guys that create fits for defenses. And then it's in turn going to open up the rest of those skill position groups. So I think they have to find a way to get those guys more involved. And another thing we need to talk about is Georgia's offensive line isn't quite playing to the standard that we've come to expect from them. Tate Ratledge did go down with an injury, and he was mauling people early in that Kentucky game. So you lose a guy like that that's going to be All-American type, going to be drafted pretty high. That's going to affect some of your play calling ability. And they were getting after Beck, right? The pass rush was pretty consistent all night. But that's when you got to find a way to get the ball to those tight ends and get those guys. And even if you need to call, and this is what I think needs to happen, right? I think too oftentimes coaches get set in their ways. Like, we're more talented. We have the better players. Let's just stick to the basics and eventually it'll work. And for the most part, it did, right? But man, get creative. Call a trick play here and there. You're not too good to do that. Call something that's going to call off the dogs a little bit in terms of the pass rush and some of those blitzers they were sending at you. Do something that's going to have the defense coordinator on his heels like, hey, man, we might only need to send 5 here. Maybe only need to send 4 here. Do something to break it up. So Bobo, I still believe in him. I think he's done a fantastic job overall. But I'm with you. That was not the best game plan. And I know, listen, you're on the road. You have a starter go down on the offensive line. Maybe you're not the most productive at the skill position this week. But that's why you get paid the big bucks, to figure it out, to find solutions. And he needs to do a little bit better job of finding solutions.
Now, officiating. The games we both just talked about had definitely some real officiating. I don't even know if I want to call them gaffes yet. I think we should talk about that. But 2 touchdowns called back for South Carolina in that game. One was massive, the pick 6 where you had Kennard, one of the defensive ends for South Carolina, who's been really good, by the way. That's a good ball player. But he nailed Garrett Nussmeier right after the pick, and they called it a blindside and an unnecessary roughness, which I personally despise that rule. If he becomes a defensive player, he should be able to get hit. Okay,
that's football 101.
Quarterbacks are allowed to get hit, and also that's what defensive coaches teach. As soon as they throw a pick, go get the quarterback. This is your free shot. Yes.
That's rule number 1, football 101. Find the quarterback after an interception and hit him. That's football 101. It's been a part of the game forever.
And then the Georgia game, there was the unnecessary, not the unnecessary roughness, but the roughing the passer that was called on Georgia, on Brock Vandegrift. Just, I can't fathom that flag being thrown in that situation. You extend a drive when they're backed up, and you completely kill the field position game for Georgia, and that's what they like to play in games like that. And then, even looking around the rest of college football, the sack by the Indiana defensive end on UCLA, where he sacked him, straight up sacked him, didn't land on him, didn't do anything. Here comes the flag for the roughing the passer. It's hard for me because I'm not blaming the officiating crews. To a certain extent, I am. And also, I forgot about the Florida targeting. That was the most egregious.
No, I was about to say that. The Florida targeting, it was a game, Jacksonville State game, where a kid got kicked out, Colorado State game. These targetings that are happening when people are lowering their head a little bit, but they're hitting them in the hip, right? There's not head-to-head contact.
But it's incidental. It's football.
Exactly, bro.
It's incidental. I can't do anything about it. If he lowers his head, lowers his shoulder, I can't do anything about hitting him in the head sometimes.
No. And even
if we're going to do it by the way of the law, us playing right guard, Kyron, sorry to cut you off. Us playing guard, I lower my head on every play and make forcible contact to the head or neck area. If we really want to do this, we can do it on every play. Stop the nonsense. It's ridiculous. Sometimes you just have to let people play football.
Yes, man. And I get, and 100% right. I get the whole player safety thing, even if they're not making forcible contact to the head or neck area. If they're lowering their head, you're trying to protect the player, right? But that's football, man. We wear helmets and pads for a reason. intent should be the number one factor in these situations, in my opinion. Sometimes you can't ignore, right? I mean, if an offensive player is lowering his helmet or he's jumping up and he's making contact and it just happens like that, okay, sometimes it's just bad luck. But on these plays where they're not even making forcible contact at the head or neck area to the defender, if it's in the hip or if it's in the chest, lower body, come on, we have to stop these targetings. And I think if we're going to call these 15-yard penalty, okay, I can live with that. I can accept it. A player being ejected and losing a half of football, and in some cases losing a full game because they get ejected in the third quarter of the game, and they're going to miss the first half of the next game. Justin Jefferson got ejected from the South Florida game for Alabama. He couldn't play to the second half of the Wisconsin game. Some kids are losing a full game of action because of these decisions, and I think we need to rectify that. If you're going to keep the 15-yard penalty in and emphasize player safety, at least make it to where these guys aren't losing actual game time. I think that's the biggest change we need to make.
I'm not mad at officiating crews.
Yeah.
I'll explain why. It's not necessarily them that has created all of this. It's the rule book. We don't have an official problem. We have a rule book problem. We have way too many judgment calls that are part of the rule book. Targeting, unnecessary roughness, roughing the passer, blindside block. These guys are going out there and everything in their eyes, it's in the eye of the beholder. And that could be different, officiating crew to officiating crew. Some that may see something as egregious may not see that thing at all. Others, other way around, vice versa. It's just, I think as much as people want to go after officiating crews, I think the biggest problem we have is the amount of judgment calls we have thrown in this damn rule book.
Right.
It puts them out there, those officials, in a terrible situation where they just have to decide using their eyes what they see. And it doesn't always work out. Before
we move on, and since we're on the officiating topic, shout out to my guy Deuce on Twitter. I'll holler at him and let him know I shouted him out here. But what do you feel about there being too many penalties that give offenses an automatic first down?
Yes.
You mentioned that, and I was like, I 100% believe that. If there's an illegal touch or something, a 5-yard penalty, you shouldn't get an automatic first down for that. Sometimes
illegal touching, holding.
Yes.
Everything. Hell, pass interference sometimes. It's like, if it's before the sticks, I don't think that should be a first down.
Right, especially some of these plays are 3rd and 15, and you get an illegal contact. And on the other side of the field, it has no consequence in the play, right? But it's an automatic first down for the offense. He said that, and I thought about it. I was like, I 100% agree with that. There's too many penalties that give us and I'm an offensive guy.
Well, Kai, you know why it is. You know why that's the case. Because it's going to drive more ratings and more offense to a TV screen. That's why they have the sort of penalties and the punitive action on those penalties that they have. They want to favor offense. We're doing it at every level of football.
100%, man.
It's brutal.
What we got next? We can go ahead.
Yeah, let's get to a winner.
I can talk about that all day.
Yeah, let's get to a winner and a loser. You open with your winner.
My winner, and I know I'm probably going to get some shit for this one, but I don't care. Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes, I thought they had a fantastic bounce-back performance against Colorado State because I think if they lose that game, that sends that program to a place of despair that they have never seen before. If you lay an egg at Nebraska, and I don't think they really laid an egg. I think they played a poor first half. But I think for them to come back in that second half of the Nebraska game, I took some positives away. There's no such thing as more victories in football, but they did give up a point, and Nebraska wasn't sitting back trying not to score. They were trying to run it up. They were throwing the ball down the field. Couldn't find the end zone in the second half. Colorado wins that 10-0, and I'm like, okay, I can see that being a momentum builder. Then they come out against Colorado State, a big rivalry game. It went to, I think it was double, triple overtime last year. Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and Torrey Horton are talking all kind of trash before the game, right? And the Instagram clicks can't help you. Deion Sanders can't play on the field, all that good stuff. And I think that the Colorado Buffaloes coming out and just dominating that game. I believe they won 28-9. Was impressive to me, especially Shadur in the offensive line. I don't care if it's Colorado State. I hate when people say, it's just Colorado State. But if Colorado State beat Colorado, you would be saying they lost to Colorado State. They can't lose to a team like that. So you can't have it both ways. I think that was very impressive for them to come out there and win that game the way they did, only give up 1 touchdown in the second half. They've given up 12 points entirely this season through 3 games in the second half. I think that defense is playing a lot better.
The defense,
and if that offensive line, if that offensive line can continue to protect Shadur like that, they're going to light up some of these Big 12 defenses and at least be in the game. So I thought that was a massive win for that program, especially after the hoopla and what could have been if they were to lose that game. So my biggest winner for the week, Coach Prime and the Colorado offensive line, particularly.
Now, my winner, I'm going to go. I think the offensive line needs to keep it up and the defense needs to keep it up. But my winner, Travis Hunter's Heisman hopes, brother. And I know that it's very unlikely that he's going to win it, but like this is the closest to Shohei Ohtani on the college football field that we'll ever see, man. 13 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 tackles, a PBU, and a 38-yard interception return. He's the best player in college football. If we're really talking about the Heisman and we're giving it to the most outstanding player in college football, he is the most outstanding player in college football. I understand what the Heisman has become. It's best quarterback on the semi-best team in the country who has the best stats. That's what it has become. But if we're being real about this award, if he can continue to play 123 snaps in a game and give you that type of production, I don't care if it's against Colorado State, UL Monroe, I don't give a damn who it's against. It's unbelievably impressive. And what strikes me about Travis Hunter, because we've already had the conversation about where does he project in the NFL. I after watching that game, I really don't know. Like I'm really thrown for a loop. And back in the day, you had Charles Woodson, right? Where it's like, yeah, he's playing some offensive snaps. He's doing some both. Champ Bailey did it at Georgia. We know all that.
Chris Gamble, Ohio State.
But those guys, we knew they were going to be defensive backs. Like 100%. There was no question about it. This guy, it's like he's so damn good at both. He's a top 10 talent at both. What do you actually do with this guy? Like this is a unprecedented thing we're seeing. And I think that the Heisman committee needs to understand how unprecedented it is. He should at the very least, as long as he doesn't miss a whole bunch of time with injury, which is possible playing this amount of snaps, he needs to be in New York. There should be no 100%. Doubt about it. If he plays 11 or 12 games this year, he should be in New York in one of those seats. I don't really care even if they go 5-7. He will have earned himself a spot. There's just 100%. No freaking doubt in my mind. When I watch him, it is unreal. Now let's go ahead and get to our losers.
Go ahead. My loser.
Yep.
Shane Beamer, South Carolina. Yep. I'm not going to put on South Carolina. I'm going to say Shane Beamer. For you to be, let's just call it for what it is, coaching for your job this season, you're already on the hot seat a little bit. And for you to come down to that situation and not trust your players. To me, if I'm Robbie Ashford, if I'm the South Carolina offensive line, I come away from that game thinking, this coach doesn't believe me. It's just point blank, period. You don't trust and believe us to get 10 yards, to get 20 yards so we can get in a better spot, because playing for the field goal is not necessarily the wrong thing there. But playing for the field goal the way you did leaves your team and leaves your kicker particularly in a spot where they're in an uncomfortable position and you can't trust that. It tells me that you don't believe in your offensive line. You rather have put the game on the foot of the kicker, which is crazy to me, than trusting your offensive line and your quarterback to at least get, let's say, 10 more yards to make it a little bit more comfortable. Maybe you don't even trust your play callers and your coaches to put you in a good enough situation to where, hey, we can run this. To me, it shows a lack of faith, a lack of trust, top to bottom, and you can't have that. Especially, let's look at what that would have done. A 3-0 start for South Carolina boosts recruiting. It boosts NIL donorship. It boosts everything you could think of for that program. It puts Brian Kelly and LSU in a precarious situation, because starting 1-2, losing to USC on a neutral field, going to South Carolina losing, and then not having an inspiring performance against a Nickel State team, FCS program in state that's not that good, would have flipped LSU season on its head going into SEC play. So I think everything that you factor into that situation makes it even more ridiculous that you leave it up to your kicker in that situation. I just can't believe the guy that is coaching for his job, coaching for his reputation and his respect, will leave it up to a kicker. I just can't believe it. And that's my biggest loser of the week, because that is a trajectory changing decision for both teams.
My loser's Billy Napier. It's just self-explanatory. He's going to get fired. They go to Mississippi State this weekend. If he doesn't win that, he's certainly going to get fired. If he wins, he's still going to get fired. It's just going to delay the inevitable. That was just an unbelievably piss poor effort by his team, by him, by the coaches. I didn't really see the fire in their eyes. They're at home in the swamp. Still didn't really see the effort I wanted to see from a team that has their backs against the wall, from a coaching staff that has their backs against the wall. And, I thought it would work out with Billy Napier. I really did. Like, he's a good recruiter. He's a good motivator of men. It's just not there. Their recruiting numbers are dropping. But here's the thing that really, concerns me for Florida going forward is you look at like sort of the short list of candidates that they want to potentially bring in. I'll bring up 3 in particular: Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, and Dan Lanning. I don't think any of those guys are going to go, just for the simple maybe Eli if they don't make the college football playoff. But think about the calendar this year. You have the early signing day, December 4th through 6th, or the early signing period, December 4th through 6th. Then you have the college football playoff, round 1, December 20th and 21st. Like, if you have a chance as a head coach to go to the college football playoff, you're going to do that. And you don't necessarily 100%. Want to leave for that job immediately, but the calendar makes you leave for it immediately. And if they want a big fish, like if they want to talk to Lane Kiffin or Eli or, Dan Lanning, it just doesn't seem like that's a realistic proposition. Like, I have a short list for them, but they're not going to like what I have to say. This is my short list. There's two guys, Glenn Schumann, one from Georgia, the defensive coordinator, and then the other one that I would look at, Jed Fish from Washington. But he just got beat by Washington State this past weekend, and there's some unproven things there. None of the – I've come around to understand or at least think this. I don't know if the hire they make is going to be exciting. It's going to look very similar to what it looked like last time with Billy Napier. I guess Eli Drinkwitz is probably the best I could do for you, but I don't think Lane Kiffin's going. I don't think Dan Lanning's going. I know they're going to reach for the stars, but I don't know if they're going to land on a cloud. You know what I mean? I don't know if they're going to land how they want to. They need a hire that's going to excite that fan base. I don't think they'll get it.
No, and there's two names that have been floated around. One of them by our guy, Carl Reed at CBS Sports 24/7. Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, which was an interesting one that I didn't really think about. And another one is Mike Elko from Texas A&M, which I don't see financially how that will work or why Elko will leave the situation he has brewing down there at College Station, because I think they're headed in the right direction. That team is playing some pretty good football.
And is Mike Elko exciting enough for Florida fans?
No, exactly. He's not going to be the exciting hire. He's not going to be the sexy hire with the recruiting that you want. But Freeman was an interesting one because of the SEC ties, what he would do in that recruiting base, the infrastructure that Florida potentially could create if they have the guy that people are going to be galvanized behind. I think that's an interesting name. But why the hell would he leave Notre Dame in that situation where he has an independent schedule for the most part? They're never going to have the most grueling schedule. He's doing very good recruiting. They're paying him very well. I don't see a situation where they could poach a guy like that either. So the names that you floated, I wouldn't leave Georgia as the defensive coordinator, maybe the head coach and waiting if I'm Glenn Schumann. I think if the Kentucky job were to open, that's a beautiful spot for a guy like Schumann, where the expectations would be to win, but not win 10 games and being in the SEC hunt right away. If you win 8 games at Kentucky every year, you sit in a pretty good spot. So I think a place like that would be cool for Glenn. But who else outside of those names? Because I'm not really seeing even the Jed Fish, right? Why would you leave a situation like Washington that's going to give you a little bit more grace in terms of building, especially after the way DeBoer left? Then going to a place like Florida where they're going to have your hair on a spike in a year or two if you're not producing against Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma. So it's a tough situation for Florida to be in.
And then the one thing they can't do is go back to the group of 5 ranks. They just did that. No. Florida fans and boosters are not going to be excited for that. Now, speaking of the group of 5, we need to get to our group of 5 game of the week. This week, it's going to be brought to you by the Pac-12 Network. How about that? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Toledo is on the road against Western Kentucky. Toledo is a 1-point favorite. Toledo, of course, just beat the absolute dog shit out of Mississippi State 41-17. We'll talk about that here in the third segment today. And Western Kentucky still has a good team. Tyson Helton really gets the thing going. I know TJ Finley's been out, but Caden Veltkamp came in last week in their game against Middle Tennessee, and 27 for 30, 398 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And he was a guy in the bowl game last year who was going to get into the portal, stayed at Western Kentucky, and had a heck of a game in the bowl game, even though he was not supposed to play because everybody else was in the portal. But that's going to be a very, very telling game. And if Western Kentucky is able to beat Toledo, I think it opens up the picture a lot more for other group of 5 schools, looking at UNLV, looking at Memphis, looking at NIU, schools like that. So we'll see how that one plays out. But let's go ahead and get to our first break of the day. And when we come back, we got a treat for y'all. We have Pro Bowl, Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles kicker, Jake Elliott joining when we return.
The Tigers football team.
Hey, how about that one over Florida State? You don't want to be a part of us? We don't want you. We don't need you, Mikey. We don't need you.
Best part of it was they just went in and beat them. They were the better team. It wasn't a fluke, nothing. They were the better team for 60 minutes and walked away with a dub in Tallahassee. It was impressive.
You know what they should have played? Doom, doom, doom. They just could have played. They could just whoop that. Hey, whoop.
Yeah,
that's how you do it.
It was impressive. So shout out to the Memphis Tigers.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
I've said it. I just think you need to ask more questions before jumping in there. Who's coming with me? What's my TV money payout? Am I, is it going to offset my travel costs?
Yep.
But I think the biggest issue you have, right? And I think all of us will agree on this. If you can get out of the AAC, you do it by any means necessary.
Yeah. You're 100% right. Get out. And have you seen like these lame duck responses or people are like, if Memphis sells out and goes into the Pac-12, then I'm done. And it's like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
What the hell are you talking about?
I've seen
do you want the athletic department to just keep operating at a deficit in a shitty ass conference?
Right. And the reasons that I keep saying is, well, it's all these these West Coast teams. Are we really going to go to the West Coast every week? And it's like, if that's what they have to do, 100%.
Tune in to On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Our guest is a man of many titles. He's a Pro Bowler. He is a Lou Groza Award finalist. He is the Philadelphia Eagles kicker. He's a Super Bowl champion. That's the one I needed to add, but I think he's most known for being the freshman year roommate of 18-year-old Gabe Kuhn. Jake Elliott, come on down. Jake, what's happening, brother?
Oh, not a lot. How are you?
I'm doing well. I would imagine, like with what happened on Monday Night Football, all the Philadelphia Eagles faithful, the fans, the media, everybody's taking it in stride. Has it been a nice, easy, breezy week for you guys over in the facility?
Yeah, that's how they do it up here. Always nice and easy. So we're definitely kicking back into full gear here. We need to get one on the road here this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Now holler at me about this, because you and Annie now have a 1-year-old at home, and I haven't really checked in with you on my show or on a podcast since that's happened. How has that been since having Bo in your world now and now having the NFL, like the balance there?
Yeah, it's been a massive transition. It almost feels like two different careers when you look at it. It's like pre-baby and post-baby. How do you deal with that, right?
Yeah.
And it's been so rewarding going into work and knowing what you're coming home to, and then good or bad game coming home to him and seeing him and watching the progress he makes day to day. When he's so young, he takes these strides. He's like a different human every week. So kind of just being a part of that and being a part of something greater than me or football. And it's been unbelievig
Yeah, for sure. Now, did you get to catch some college football this past weekend? Holler at me about that.
I did. I caught the most important game. Big win for the boys down south.
Did you get to talk a little shit? You have Josh. Let's see. You have Josh Sweat and Johnny Wilson, I think, on the team from Florida State.
You know what? They were down bad the last 2 weeks. I didn't want to hit them too much with it early. So, 0-3 for those guys now. So I might need to wait for a win in order to give them a little shit.
They're kind of cooked, man. Seeing Norvell, because you were with Norvell for 1 year. Yeah. And then you were gone, man. Seeing that for him, it's brutal. That is as nasty as it gets. That team's I know you're not going to trash them, but that team's no good, man.
Yeah, I definitely haven't watched enough of them yet. I think Memphis does look solid though. I think they got a good team right now. So it's hard to really gauge where Florida State's at from my own perspective. I just haven't seen them enough. But knowing Mike and his staff, it's hard to figure out whether they're gonna put something together here. He's too motivating. He's got too good of a staff. He's too good of a coach. So, personally speaking, I hope they can get that thing turned around as well.
Dope. First of all, thank you for joining us, Jake. Second, man, can you kind of talk about locker room dynamics? I know people might think the kicker is the guy that get picked on, or the specialists are the guy that get picked on, or kind of the butt of the joke. But if you ever been in a locker room, you know that normally the specialists are some of like the funniest, coolest dudes on the team. Can you kind of talk about what it's like being a kicker in the locker room?
Yeah, man, it's fun. I mean, I've been around there long enough now where I feel like I've gained a lot of respect in the locker room, and we got a good group of dudes that get along with everybody. So a funny team, man. It's not we don't have any niche groups. Everyone's kind of together, and it's a fun locker room. And you look back at Memphis, like we had such a good group there. Like I was roommates with Gabe. Like we were all connected. So I feel like those stereotypes are kind of left in the past now. I think everybody respects their own craft. I mean, once you get to the league, especially, like everyone's so good and so good at their individual job, and it does take everybody. It's a collective effort, and that's why football is such a cool sport. It really is not a one-man job. Like basketball, you can have one or two guys and be a successful team. It's 11 guys every single play, and it's got to work. So in that regard, like I don't think those stereotypes are really quite there anymore.
Well, and also, Jake, I can tell you this, Kai, this dude would just kick all day. He hurt himself a couple of times in Memphis doing it. He just wouldn't stop. Like all the snappers and the holders, our guy, shout out Evan Michael, shout out Trevor Morgan. They had to pull him back sometimes. Now, holler me about this, because I see him on Monday Night Football, and I love him, and I love how much he sort of brings to the broadcast. He was there in the booth, obviously, while you were playing. But Jason Kelsey, seeing him on the other side of this thing, is that strange? Because I know how much he meant to y'all's locker room.
Yeah, how much he meant and how much he still means. I mean, the guy won't leave the building, so he's still around.
Is he still there just about every day?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, he's a local Philly guy. He's going to be there through and through. So he hangs around still, and he's still very much a part of this thing and whatever his role is. But he's got a ton of different avenues he's going down now, so he's staying busy. That's for sure. Yeah,
for sure. And they just got that. What was it, a $100 million deal from Amazon for the new height? Shit.
Yeah,
I need something like that, sir. I need something like that. Golly, I need to get my money up, man. Now holler at me about this, because this is sort of the obligational question when you talk about like Memphis football, where we both came from. Because I can tell you for a fact, I didn't know shit about Memphis football before I got the offer. Like not a damn thing. The only reason I knew about where the school was and like that they had Division I sports is because of Derrick Rose and CDR and them in 08. Like, did you know that Memphis football even had a program when you got an offer here?
No, I mean, I'm kind of with you there. Like I grew up in Chicago, so I obviously was a big D Rose guy. So yeah, I knew he went to Memphis. That's pretty much all I knew at the time. I mean, I knew they were a D1 program because they were my only offer, and that's why I took it. And but once I got down there, man, like once I got down on my recruiting trip and was able to see the city and kind of see what the program stood for, and got to meet Justin and Coach Sheebs at the time, like a lot of good dudes and a lot of great coaches in that building when you look back at it. So yeah, like you didn't know a ton about it, but I'm grateful that I got that opportunity and took it.
Yeah, no, with Coach Sheebs, Kyron and I, a couple weeks, it was 2 weeks ago, we had Barry Odom on, Coach Odom. And he at UNLV now. You know, Sheebs is coaching at UNLV. Yeah. Have you caught up with his crazy ass lately, man? That guy's still crazy as all get out.
I need to give him a call. The problem is when you call him, he talks for about 5 minutes. You can't get a word in. So I might have to mute him or something and get some talking in.
He's one of those football coaches, and I know we all had him, and we can, you just know them. Like every time you see them in the hallway or strike up a conversation, it's just like strictly football. There's like, it's barely about your life. There's nothing else. Like I was like the third stringer on Punch Shield my sophomore year. Every time I saw him, he's like, "Hey, baby, when you sit, you got to slide over, get big." It's like, man, I'm third string on Punch Shield. I'm not going to be on the field doing this shit. He's just one of those coaches.
It's turning in his mind every hour of the day. So he's got to get it out every time he sees you.
That's dope. I was wondering, the end of the game didn't go how you guys wanted, but let's say you guys did get into field goal range. There's 4 seconds left on the clock. What's your process like getting ready for those big kicks? I mean, I did a little bit of research before. You have a 61-yard game-winning field goal before. What's the process like? Do you have a mental routine you go through? Do you just want to get some cuts in? Do you kind of like the extra time that you get iced per se? What's your process like for that?
Yeah, I try to do a good job about not trying to change my process at all when we get in those situations. So it does feel like every kick does have a good rhythm to it, a good routine. Feels like I've been there before without getting, because it's hard to get those reps in. but I mean, you get as many as you can during training camp, during practice, and then I like to stay over in the net area, and I'm kind of hitting the ball just to stay loose and stay in a rhythm every down. So first down, second down, third down, I try to hit one, especially in those drives where it can come pretty quickly. And I'm communicating with Nick, with our special teams coordinator, just hey, where do we need to get to here? Like the other night, we had a good right to left wind. Like if we can call a play, get it to the right hash, that'd be helpful. But just having those conversations, knowing we've gone through these situations a million times is helpful, obviously.
What about Coach Sirianni? He's a fiery dude, man. Like he celebrates like y'all play like the players. Like the other night, seeing CJ Gardner-Johnson getting that nice 4th and 1 stop. By the way, that was beautiful football. I still can't get over that play. That was nuts. That was ridiculous. But he's celebrating with you guys. Like I know he is the coach, but like is he more of he's like sort of in the same line as you guys? Obviously, he's going to give you messaging and he's going to give you speeches and things like that. And there's a respect factor with that. But it feels like he's more in line with one of you guys, still relatively young and still has that fire in him.
Yeah, man, he's one of the guys and he brings energy every day. I think that's why we love him here. But he also breaks down situational football like I've never seen it before. Like we will go through like you might see a situation once every 20 years in this league, and we will rep that situation 4,000 times. Like as a kicker who's been out of offensive, defensive meetings my whole life, like I have never been so football smart since he's arrived. And it's just because we rep these situations over and over and over again to the point where like I know what play call's coming on third down when we're in certain situations because I need to know that when I'm about to go out on the field. Like I know what he's thinking constantly. So while he shows that fire and that passion and seems like a crazy dude on the sidelines, that's not necessarily him all the time, but he is one of us. And I think all the guys respect that about him. Makes you want to play for him. And he's just a smart dude.
Does it kind of confuse you? Like, it seems like just sort of nationally, and I get there's other fan bases that hate on you guys because you guys have done a lot of winning under Nick, but it's like, it feels like there's this negative connotation sometimes when people talk about Coach Sirianni. And I like, do you understand any of that? Is it just sort of like, man, I don't care, who gives a damn what they have to say about him?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you hear it a little bit here and there. I mean, we're in a big sports market. It's Philadelphia. It's always been known for that. But being in the doors and understanding who he really is, I obviously I don't see all that stuff. I don't get any of that. But right. I know who he is as a person to the core and what he cares about and what his values are and how he values the team and everything he does is for the team. So it's easy for me to get behind him and back him.
Yeah, now do me a favor and holler at me about the new kickoff rules. I need to know about that because you're not kicking off anymore, are you?
I haven't the last 2 games. No, I don't.
But you could if they want you to just bang it out of the back of the end zone, they'll probably throw you in there.
Well, that's what Braden's been doing the last 2 games. Right. So Braden's got a big leg. He's kicked off before, so it's kind of nice having the option to have 2 guys that can do it. And then we're obviously working all these specialty kicks on the side that will probably need a lot more once the season gets going. The cold weather comes in, ball's not traveling as far. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress, I think, around the league for everybody. But it is different. It'll be interesting to see how it changes the game.
Well, I don't want to get you in trouble, but do you want to pick one or the other, old rules or new rules?
I mean, I do think it can be an exciting play. I also think it's like you said, you don't want to get me in trouble, but yeah. I also do think it's slightly more dangerous for head injuries.
Really?
The way the new one comes, because everybody is now, there's no levels anymore. Like everyone's on one level. So people are caving at the ball east and west, and it's a lot of friendly fire coming across the field, shooting your shot, trying to make a play. But it's a lot of guys shooting at one level, if that makes sense.
See, that's kind of wild because I feel like this was like a thought of not letting a kickoff team get this crazy ass run up. But I think most of the time when you kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, you're not even making contact.
Right.
I guess that's sort of the idea.
Yeah, they're trying to eliminate obviously like the long sprints, high speed collisions, but you're still kind of getting that just in a different way because now guys are shooting across from east and west trying to make a play at the 25, 30 yard line where used to have kind of stacked levels, and there wasn't necessarily those big collisions.
There's just been more returns, right? Like that's sort of the idea of what we've been seeing so far. Like the positive returns of this thing is that they have been returning the ball a little bit more, but there hasn't been massive big plays yet.
Yeah, nothing crazy yet. I think, like I said, once the weather gets a little bit colder and the ball isn't traveling as much, I think you're going to get probably a little bit more action.
And I think one of my biggest issues, because you were good at this at the University of Memphis, the surprise onside takes that out of the game, man.
Yeah,
like that's completely gone. Like coming out of halftime, trying to steal a possession, that's cooked now because you have to literally walk up to the ref and say, we are onside kicking. That's the part of it that does bother me to a certain extent. I know that bothers you at least a tad bit.
Yeah, for sure. No, it was big. If you got a kicker that can execute some of those things, and you find a good scheme, and you can scheme up another team and find a guy bailing early or whatever it may be. You're able to steal one, and it can be a big momentum shift in a game.
Yeah, no. When's your bye week, by the way? Let's
early.
Okay.
Or week 5.
You going to be able to make it to a Memphis game this year?
Same bye week.
That's tough.
Damn.
It is every year. I swear.
I got one more for you, and I hated getting asked this question when I was still playing. But have you ever thought about what you're going to do? You know, when you hang up the cleats, whenever that time comes. Hopefully, it's a long time from now. But everybody and their mom has a podcast now, especially athletes are jumping in the field. A lot of guys go into coaching. Do you see yourself getting into any one of those realms when you're done?
Oh, it's going to be interesting. I don't know for sure yet. It's something I've definitely thought about a lot as I've been getting a little bit older. I think it'll be hard for me to not be involved in football in some way. Like every off season, I'm so excited once the off season begins and like I get a little time, but then there's a point in like April where it's like, all right, I'm kind of ready to go back and be around it again.
You think some type of coaching or drilling?
I don't know if it'll be coaching or if it'll be like more specialist training. I could definitely work in the NFL, like with kickers specifically, I think, or doing camps of some sort. I'm like just like a little bit addicted to like the fundamentals of field goal kicking, of helping guys. Like every time Braden's out there punting, like I feel like I'm trying to give my input, whether he likes it or not. He usually doesn't like it, but I feel like it's fun for me to kind of dissect what things are going wrong, what things are going right, and I could see myself in that role at some point.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the Corn Ferry Tour maybe after you're done, something like that. Come on, brother. I know you play a bunch of golf.
We'll definitely start playing a little bit more golf, and we'll see. If I get really good really fast, maybe I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, well, have you won a couple of tournaments in the off season? Because I know you participate in a bunch.
I haven't won any tournaments, but it has been fun. Philly is such like an old amateur golf-ridden city, where there's a million like high amateur level tournaments. I've put my name in the hat and played in a couple of them and played well enough to qualify for some of the bigger ones. So it has been a lot of fun. But getting into competitive golf is totally different, man. I feel so uncomfortable in that setting. Like standing over a 4-foot putt in a tournament setting is so much different than with your buddies. But it is fun to get in that competitive mindset in the off season and do it in something I'm just totally uncomfortable in.
Yeah, when I stand over a 4-foot putt, I like having like a light beer within like arm's reach. Right. So like I cannot relate to that in the slightest.
No, we've definitely in tournament settings gotten to the 9th hole and been like, I think I just need one here.
Yeah, it's a turn. Get a glizzy and a light beer. No, that's how it needs to work out.
That'll make me feel better about myself.
Yeah, well, he's a $24 million man, Lou Gross Award finalist, kicker for the Eagles, Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, Jake Elliott. Jake, appreciate the heck out of it, man. Let's do this again soon.
You got it. Thanks, brother. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
When you have the opportunity to play North Carolina at home, you have Alabama on the road right after that. Before the season starts, it kind of gives you a bar of where you are and what you worked on since June and July. And you can't have that anywhere. I mean, you can't get those type of teams. So when you can get that game, it's huge for your team because it gives you that understanding of where you are at that point in time. You know, I've had a ton of talent before, but this year's team is different. It's different because they're extremely close. high character young men that you don't have to coach their effort, you don't have to coach their attitudes. They're together, they're close, and the city is definitely going to fall in love with this team.
One of the defining factors of a good, well-coached defense is rallying to the ball, and it's something you hear from Pee-wee football all the way up until the NFL. And that's what this defense does. Their pursuit is really, really phenomenal. Having a centerpiece like Chandler Martin, who is just every week looks like he continues to get better. He's what makes this defense go. Rallies behind him.
12 TFLs against Florida State.
Yep.
4 sacks, brother. Like, get the out of here. I said, bring some 5-man, 6-man, 7-man pressures. I didn't think they'd do it like that, dog. Yeah. You got to that fourth quarter and Jordan said, I have no respect for these guys.
No,
we're better than you.
And we're not scared.
He just brought 6-man pressure after 6-man pressure, then a 7-man pressure, then a simulated 8-man pressure. It's like this guy is a psychopath in the best possible way.
Tune into On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, now we're back in on G5 Classified Episode 4. Time to get to our Group of 5 check-in for the week. Of course, we already talked about Memphis at length, but there's 2 schools we have to focus on. We'll go in order of when they played. I'm going to start with UNLV, 23-20 over Kansas, and I got to give them a hell of a lot of credit. They are going to be a very, very sneaky team this entire year. I know Kansas came off the loss against Illinois, and they're maybe not exactly what we thought they would be coming into the season as a top 25 team, but watching UNLV screw around offensively the entire night, like not just for a quarter, not for a half, the entire night. They never had a rhythm offensively. It was just sort of, there was a deep drop by Ricky White, a deep drop by De Jesus. Like they had so many points that they left out there. But one thing I can say about this team, they are very resilient. They are resilient as it gets, and they definitely embody, and I'm not trying to suck up too much, but they embodied sort of the personality of their head coach, former linebacker at Mizzou, all-conference type of guy there, sort of a heady inside linebacker type, and Barry Odom. They definitely take on his personality. They may not be the most talented in the world. They may not have everything going how they want it to go offensively, but they still found a way to win a game in the waning moments.
100%. And I think it was good for them because they had a national stage, right? Everything that he got on the podcast and said, you saw it in that team. That is a team that believes. That's a team that is there to compete, and not only just be there, to compete and have a good, feel good moral victory. They're going to win games, man. And I think it was beautiful the last drive when they got inside the 10. There was no gadget. And we know Brendan Marion he's a great offensive mind, right? The go-go offense is fantastic. It was no bullshit when they got in there. They're like, we're going to run the football. It's 3rd and goal. It's 20 seconds left, however much time is left. We're going to trust our guys up front. We're going to trust our running back. We're going to get in the end zone. And I love that. There was no bells and whistles. There was no cute stuff. He's like, I'm going to put the game on my big dogs up front, and we're going to get in the end zone. And they went in there and scored and ultimately pulled the ball game out. So I thought that was beautiful the way they did it because everything he said on the podcast, you saw on the field, and you don't always see the results match up with where the coach's belief and where the coach's mind is. So it was cool to see that happen.
And Matt Sluka did his best Paul Crew longest yard.
Sluka Doncic, baby.
Jesus, bro. Like, he scared the hell out of me, too. He had that one fumble on 1st and 10 at the 47, on their own 47, that went out, got kicked around. Kansas couldn't pick it up. He falls on it for a 9 – or one of his teammates falls on it for a 9-yard gain. They were just sloppy on offense. I'll say this. If they really want to accomplish what they want to accomplish, they're going to have to get it right offensively. They have not looked good enough, but it's been good enough through 3 weeks, but it won't continue. You can't continue to have those balls bounce your way.
Even that end of the half situation where they scored.
Up the chance.
Say it again. Even the end of the half situation where they scored, they did call the timeout. You're in disarray, and then you happen to get the touchdown at the end. That was crazy, but it worked out. But like you said, they're going to have to tighten the kinks up a little bit if they want to really get to the playoffs.
At that end of the half situation, was Kansas just like so taken aback by the lack of time management from the UNLV offense? That's what it felt like. It's just like they suck so bad with their time management, their clock management, that Kansas got caught off guard. easy throw down the sideline. It was like, how do you allow that to happen? Kansas is not the same team. Now, I want to go to Toledo, too. That's our other group of 5 team that we need to highlight. They were better at every position than Mississippi State. There's no other way to put it. 41-17. They got up 28-7 in the first half. They had 21 points in the second quarter, and they just look like a hell of a team. And I'll give Jason Candle a whole lot of credit. He's been really good at Toledo quietly for a long, long time. But seeing him do that to Mississippi State on the road, that was not so quietly. Not very quiet what he was able to do and going to hammer them. And Toledo really does have some talent. I like their quarterback, Tucker Gleason. He's got some game. He doesn't really make a bunch of mistakes with the football. Their defense was pretty solid for the most part, although that's not something I'm used to. I've watched Toledo over the years. They're usually a very offensive-based team, but their defense looked good against Mississippi State. I don't know if that's because Mississippi State's bad or Toledo's good, but Toledo definitely inserted themselves in this conversation.
100%. I think maybe a bigger conversation to be had in, the future podcast. The MAC is pretty damn good this year. They've had some really good showings. NIU goes and beats Notre Dame. Even though Bowling Green lost the game, they went toe-to-toe with Penn State. Eastern Michigan beating Jacksonville State, albeit, that Jacksonville State fumbled on the 2-yard line with a chance to win the game. They snapped the ball over the quarterback's head and end up losing the game to a field goal in overtime. But the MAC has had some really good showings, and it's going to be a little bit tougher than maybe I anticipated for a Toledo or maybe a Northern Illinois to run the table in the MAC. I think they're going to beat up on each other this year and kind of take themselves out of the playoff spot. But I think you'll see a lot of 8-9-win teams in the MAC this season. I think they're pretty damn competitive.
And speaking of the MAC, we may have, I'm just going to tease something, we may or may not have a pretty influential name in the Mid-American Conference coming on the podcast in the coming weeks. So definitely pay attention to that. But the MAC has been good. The problem they have every year, though, you know this as well as I do, Tuesday, Wednesday night games, play during the week, you have more cannibalism. They just they get into those nasty matchups at nighttime on Wednesday in the cold and it's snowing. It's hard to be an undefeated team in the MAC. It just is.
Yes.
That's the problem they run. Now, we know that there are bigger things. I hate that we have to talk about this while football's going on. I really do. I despise it. But we have to talk conference realignment now because the Pac-12 has just put together their conference. They're at least trying to put together their conference. What they did in the past week was add all of the states. On top of Washington State and Oregon State, they brought in Colorado State, San Diego State, Boise State, and Fresno State. And now, from the looks of it, they just had a midweek meeting, and they're looking to add Tulane and the University of Memphis. I guess I'll start when it comes to sort of the making. We'll talk about what it means to Memphis in a second.
Right.
But the makings of this conference, there's no geographic, footprint at all because those lines are completely knocked down. What they're trying to do is be the best of the rest. They're trying to be at the top of the group of 5, which will become a group of 6. We may have to rename the podcast G6 Classified coming up here soon. But they're just trying to be the best of the rest, and they're trying to generate as much TV revenue from as many big markets for college football as they possibly can. I'm not necessarily mad at it, but again, I think there is this backdrop of where we have gone and where we have been before and the escape from tradition that always is going to bother me in some type of way. But I do think what the Pac has done here to try to keep themselves alive using these schools, I think it's the right move for them at this particular moment.
Yeah, I think it's commendable. And I think that if you're going to do it, the best way to go about it is to get proven programs with good recruiting bases that will be able to sustain their level of play. And when you look at the Boise States, you look at potentially adding a Memphis, potentially adding a Tulane, you look at adding, the San Diego States, the teams that they went and added are proven programs that are going to be able to maintain their recruiting base and probably recruit a little bit more nationally with a better spotlight. Yep. And they'll be able to compete right away. You have a lot of bowl eligible teams. You have a lot of teams that can, command some spotlight in terms of national attention, with the games when they match up. People are going to watch those games. You might have to play on a Friday night. I think they should commandeer a Friday night and make it like Pac-12 after dark again, right? Or maybe even a Thursday night. I mean, those type of stages will be perfect for those teams. And if you look at the infrastructure around those teams, like I said, it's really good because it's stable at the very least. You can talk about expanding and kind of getting back to a level of prominence later. But if you get those stable programs that have proven they can be in the bowl hunt every year, commissioners are going to love that. Investors are going to love that. TV networks are going to love that. I think it's a good start for the Pac-12's rebirth.
And now for Memphis, I'll give my opinion. I've been giving it way too much lately, but I'm still going to throw it out there. I think if they get the invite, they should go. And the reason I say that is because we just got reports from the ACC, which is the power conference jump that Memphis has been wanting to make, that Florida State and Clemson are likely to stay in that conference because they came to some sort of agreement, at least in principle, that if you have higher TV ratings, you get a bigger TV revenue share and all that type of thing, which is what they've been asking for from the beginning. And also they have taken the grant of rights, and they're potentially going to take it from 2036 to 2030. So it looks like they're going to be whole, at least for the time being. So Memphis's prospects to jump into the ACC are seemingly gone. Now, when it comes to going from the AAC to this newly formed Pac-12, it's basically I brought it up on The Bluff, another podcast I'm on with Christian Fowler. Every single Tuesday at noon is when that releases. It's the equivalent of going from an 03 Camry to a 08 Accord. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's sort of what it is. It's a step in the right direction. It's better. Probably you'll get more money in TV revenue when you get there. But you're going to have to iron those details out right now so you're not caught, with your pants down by the time you get there. And I think I believe in Ed Scott and the people in the athletic department here at the University of Memphis. I believe that they will make the right decision. But I'm curious when it comes to, because I think the payout for the AAC right now, the American, is $7.5 per school a year. I wonder how much higher this one will be. If they can double that, I feel really good about it. But I'm not quite sure they'll get to that because you're going to have to offset a buyout cost and travel when you make this jump.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of want to leave that to you, that side of it. And I'm just thinking from a football perspective. From a football perspective, I don't think the jump is going to be – it's a jump a little bit, but I think they'll be able to go in there and compete right away with those schools. They're on the same playing field in terms of athlete, in terms of coaching. I think they could go in and have immediate success in the Pac-12. And even if it's not the Pac-12 that we grew up loving, it's still much better on paper. Yeah. You're going to get more investment. You're going to get more money. You're going to get more spotlight. They're in a position where I think they could go in and I think it helps. And this is a different conversation. It might be enough to help entice Ryan Silverfield to stay a little bit longer.
Maybe I should have banged that home too. I'm glad you brought it up this way. From a football perspective, better scheduling, bigger footprint for recruits. When it comes down to it, you have access to the college football playoff still. You have access still. I don't care who. Like none of these schools are just like so unbelievably good that you feel like you can't win a conference championship in this new conference. No, I think the conference championship is wide open for you. It's just going to be tougher to get there because you'll have more competition along the way. But I think Memphis on good years can absolutely go and be a conference championship contender. So from a football perspective, I think it's sort of, a home run for the most part, or not a home run, but, pretty close. It's a double or a triple. But then also, I think that the home games too here at the University of Memphis, like it's the difference between playing Oregon State and Boise State or UAB and Rice. You know what I mean? Right. It's just, I don't think it's going to, fill up the stadium by 20,000 more people, but I think 5,000 more people is a realistic goal when you're playing teams of that ilk compared to what you have in the AAC. But ultimately for Memphis, it's just like staying in the American does nothing for you. Right? Yes. Like it's a dying conference. Their answer to this whole thing was to go get Air Force. Really? Like,
make it the Service Academy conference.
Yeah. So, and also, let's talk about this on a football perspective. This made me laugh. Imagine having all of those military schools in the same conference. Your knees would be blown out by week 5. Like, God, imagine having all 3 of them on your schedule one year.
Yeah. That'd be tough.
The hell with that. That's terrible.
But I think for Memphis, it's just good business. It's progress. It's maybe not the progress that the fan base and the donors and maybe the administrators have wanted over the course of the year. They've been shooting for the stars, but it's progress nonetheless. And I think that's where you need to be. Kind of like what I said when the Pac-12 is just getting off the foot and having some stability and then growing. Same for Memphis, man. You've been in a good enough program for long enough to where you should shoot for it, even if it's just incremental progress. It'll benefit you over the long run.
And real quick, what really put me over the top was the bowl tie-ins. The the lowest paying bowl for from a payout perspective in the Pac-12 still is 2.2 million, and the highest paying bowl in the American is 2 million. So it's just it just to me kind of seems like a no-brainer, but we'll see, when the invite comes and if Memphis ultimately applies for membership, which I to be honest with you, I'm kind of expecting. Now, let's go ahead and get to the end of the show here and wrap it up with our picks. We have a lock, a shock, and a bonus. I'll let you start with your lock, Kai.
So my lock of the week, I'm going, let's see. I got Syracuse minus 8.5 against Stanford, excuse me. I think they're going to be a team that's going to shock a lot of people. I said at the beginning of the season what Fran Brown's doing, just from a recruiting perspective, before we ever saw them on the field, was really impressive. And I think they've gotten off to a fantastic start. You got Kyle McCord lighting it up there at quarterback.
Yeah,
I know one fan base is a little salty about that. They're kind of downplaying him a little bit. I won't get into it, but I think he's playing really good football. I think they're going to be able to cover that spread. I think they'll win by 17 points in a comfortable game because Stanford's a competitive team. They have some decent players, but I think they're going to be able to handle business.
Tell me if you think this line is strange for my lock. I'm going to take Tulane minus 3.5 over Louisiana.
Yeah,
Louisiana is only 3.5-point dogs. Now, granted, they're at home, but their two games have been against Grambling and Kennesaw State. They beat Grambling 40-10, Kennesaw State 34-10. Tulane, I really like their redshirt freshman quarterback Darian Mensah. He's a really good ball player. He struggled a little bit against Oklahoma, but had a hell of a day against Kansas State. Mekhi Hughes, still a really good running back. I think they have the guys in the trenches to go make something happen. Their defense can be stout when it needs to be. And hell, even against that Oklahoma team, they had a chance late in the early fourth quarter to keep that game within reach. Their offense couldn't quite get it going.
24-19 game in 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They had a chance to take the lead in the fourth. I think they've been very competitive against their G4 teams.
Isn't it just strange though? 3.5. It's like it's like they're trying to make me take Tulane. But you know what? If it's a trap line, I'll take the trap. I'll take Tulane on the road against Louisiana minus the 3.5. My shock, I'm going to go with Kansas plus 2.5 at West Virginia. I think Tulane and Kansas had something in common for me this week. They have bounce back games. They have to prove that they're back. They have to prove, okay, now we have 2 losses. We have to be able to go get a win if we want this season to go how we envisioned it as the season began. So I'm going to take Kansas plus the 2.5. I think they could win outright against West Virginia, and we know what that would mean for Neil Brown and how those wheels could start spinning again. But give me Kansas.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up because that has a lot of wheels turning. That could impact a school like Jacksonville State because there's been some rumors about Rich Rod wanting to return to West Virginia. I don't know how accurate that is, but that would be a funny scenario. But he's
going to have to get a win this year. He's going to have to get up off the mat.
Yeah, got to get up off the mat for sure. But my shock of the week is going to be South Florida plus 16.5 against Miami. I think Miami is a team that's probably one of the best 15 teams we've seen in the college football season so far. But I don't think they've had a particularly difficult schedule. The Florida win looks a lot less impressive the more Florida plays. They play FAMU, and I don't even remember the other team they played. Ball State. So They haven't particularly been tested yet. So I think that South Florida, what they did against Alabama for 3.5 quarters, bouncing back. They started a little slow against Southern Miss, but ended up blowing that game out. They're going to score points. I think that is a game that's going to be much closer than people expect, and I like them plus 16.5 to cover that.
Now, let me go ahead and give you my bonus, and I'm going to go to a big game. In my opinion, one of the biggest games of the weekend. I know everybody's going to look at the USC and, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind, Michigan game. But I'm going to go with the Tennessee-Oklahoma game. It's number 5 versus number 6 versus number 15. Excuse me. I'm going to go Tennessee minus 7. I like them. I think Oklahoma has played a little too close with some of their opponents. We saw against Tulane 24-19, like you said, with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They played a 16-12 game against a Houston team that just does not have it this year. I think that Tennessee has it. Now, the one thing that is going to concern me about Tennessee the rest of the year, I've seen them with a lead, right? And we see how quick when they get up a score and they get the ball back, how quick it could snowball for another team. I want to see them from behind. I want to see, like, before I put them in this, like, national title conversation, I want to see how they play when somebody else puts it on them early. Can they play from the behind? Will they press a little bit too hard? Nico's a young quarterback still. That's something I want to see. But Dylan Sampson's been phenomenal. Their run game's been phenomenal. Nico has been phenomenal. I think that they lay it on Oklahoma.
I like that. And I'm going to stay right there with the Oklahoma and Tennessee game, and I'm going to take the over. I've been really heavy with the overs with teams that have proven they've been explosive. I've been sticking with Alabama, and they've hit 2 of the 3 overs, and they were like 3 points from hitting the over against South Florida, the team total, that is. So I'm going to stick with that. I think Tennessee is going to score somewhere in the 30s and 40s, and I believe Oklahoma is going to score a little bit more than people expect, especially with the return of wide receiver Nick Anderson. He's one of the more explosive guys in college football. So having Nick Anderson back, you have Deion Burks there, and that offensive line who's replacing all 5 starters. I think as the season goes on, they're going to continue to get better and better and give Jackson Arnold time. And he's proven that he can make plays with his legs as well. So I like the total over to be over 57.5. It's a little steep in a big time matchup like that, but I think from what I've seen from Tennessee and what I'm expecting Oklahoma to continue to do is in terms of improving, I like that enough in that scenario, especially it's early enough in the season where the defenses aren't going to necessarily be playing lights out just yet. I like the over in that game. Give me the over 57.5.
All right, now before we get out of every podcast, we're going to start a new tradition. I'm just going to ask you, Kai, where do the people out there find more of you? Give them the Twitter, where they find your work, Sports Illustrated, the whole thing. So where do they find more of you?
So find me on Twitter at Kyron Samuels is my @name, and then you'll have a Linktree link that takes you to my Sports Illustrated work, the work that I do with the pulling guard, the video stuff here, the podcast links will be here because I know some people are, hey, like if you have a Spotify link or I'm on Apple, I need Apple link. You'll have everything there where you can find Apple, Spotify, the whole RSS feed, and the YouTube as well. So find me on Twitter, and everything else I'm doing you can find there, and I'll be keeping you guys posted. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and find me on Twitter, G_Coon71. You can find most of my work there. Have On the Bluff coming out every single Tuesday at noon right here on the Believe and Bluff City Media Podcast Network. 92.9 FM, 4 to 7, the Gabe Coon Show every weekday here in Memphis. You can go to 929ESPN.com or download the Odyssey app, but go check it out. And check out all of the great podcasts we have under this umbrella with Bluff City Media. You can go check out the Anthony Sane Show on the Bluff. We have so many different, the No Bluffing podcast. We have so many different podcasts under this one umbrella. So check out all that. Make sure you go like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can go to bluffcitymedia.co to check out all the articles and all the podcasts. But we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. We'll talk to you next week.
One more. Shout out to producer Kenny. I'm a shout out.
Shout out to Kenny. Shout out to Kenny. Let's give him a quick round of applause. Come on, let's do it. But we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.